All right, so you've probably heard this term thrown around a lot lately, the Global South. But what does it actually mean? It's way more than just a buzzword. It's a concept that's really shaking up how we think about politics, money, and global power. So let's dive in and unpack it.
First things first, let's get a common misconception out of the way. When we talk about the Global South, are we literally just talking about, the southern half of the globe? It seems logical, right? But nope. The real answer is a whole lot more interesting than simple geography.
Here's the key thing you've got to grasp. The Global South isn't really a place on a map. It's a political and economic idea. It's a term for a group of nations, mostly in Asia, Africa, and Latin America, that are all connected by a shared story. A story of colonialism, of facing similar challenges in development, and of often being on the tough end of how the global economy is set up.
To really get this, we've got to look back in time a bit. This whole shared identity, it didn't just appear out of thin air. It was forged in the fire of a common struggle for freedom and a real voice on the world stage.
You can actually watch this idea evolve through history. It really kicked off in the mid-20th century, as all these countries started gaining their independence from colonial powers. Then, during the Cold War, a bunch of them got together to form the non-aligned movement. They basically said, hey, we're not picking a side between the US and the Soviet Union. That move, that search for a third way, really laid the foundation for everything we're seeing today.
And this brings us right to the core tension, this idea that for decades defined the whole relationship, a huge divide between the world's established powers and all these newly emerging nations.
And here's what that imbalance looked like. It was a seriously uneven playing field. On one side, you had the global north, which pretty much dominated the world economy, held the keys to technology, and crucially, set the rules of the game. And on the other side, the global south, which had to deal with economic inequality, a big technology gap, and was basically forced to play by rules they had no part in making.
This quote really hits the nail on the head. It wasn't just about money, it was about power. Think about it. The very systems that run global trade, finance, and politics were built at a time when most of the countries in the global south didn't even have a seat at the table.
But here's the thing. The story doesn't end there. In fact, this is where it gets really fascinating. Because faced with this stacked deck, these nations decided to stop playing the old game and started writing their own rules.
So, instead of just waiting around for help or investment from the North, a totally different strategy started to take shape. It was a deliberate choice to build power and create new opportunities from within the Global South itself. And we call this South-South cooperation.
And look, this wasn't just some vague, wishful thinking. There was a real playbook. Step 1, start trading more with each other. Step 2, share technology and ideas directly, cutting out the middleman. And step 3, this one is a game changer. Create your own financial institutions, like development banks, so you can fund your own projects on your own terms.
And this isn't just theory. You can see it happening all around us. There are new development banks that are directly challenging the old guard. You see these powerful regional economic groups that give their members way more clout. And when you look at big global forums like the UN, countries from the Global South are more and more often negotiating and voting together as one solid bloc.
Yeah, it might be tempting to look at all this and see a simple story of one team versus another. But the reality today, it's so much more complicated than that.
Which brings us to the big question, right? With all these different countries and interests, can we really think of the Global South as one single unified team that always moves and thinks as one?
The honest answer is no. The Global South is absolutely not a monolith. It's an incredibly diverse mix of countries. Sure, they work together a lot, but they also compete with each other. They've got their own national priorities, their own internal arguments, and are at totally different stages of development.
This diversity means you can't paint them all with the same brush. You've got these rising powers with booming economies and major influence on the world stage. Then you have the least developed nations, which are still facing some really tough, persistent challenges. And stuck right in the middle are a whole bunch of middle-income countries that are navigating both of those realities at the same time.
So where does all of this leave us? What does the future hold for the Global South, this collection of nations that is truly reshaping the world as we know it?
When you boil it all down, the best way to think about the Global South today is as this dynamic, contested space. It's a place of incredible emerging power, where countries are stepping up and demanding a bigger say in how things are run. But at the very same time, it's a place where deep, historical inequalities still exist. Both of those things are true at once, and that's what makes the future so interesting and unpredictable.
And that
Right there is the big question we're left with. As these new powers continue to rise from within the group, will they find new ways to unite and tackle the big challenges they all share? Or will their own success spark new rivalries and new forms of competition among themselves? That is the dynamic to watch. Thanks for joining us.